Hi, I'm Ken Fish. I'm the founder of Kingdom Fire Ministries, and I've been traveling and ministering for over 30 years. I was a disciple of, I guess, an understudy to the late John Wimber, and I worked with him at Vineyard Ministries International. And I was also very friendly with John Paul and Diane Jackson, both during the time that they were in Kansas City with Mike Bickle, as well as during the years that they were at the Anaheim Vineyard with John Wimber, and then in subsequent years as well. I am here today to begin a series on the minor prophets. And you might be wondering, why in the world do we need to do that? I mean, what is all this Old Testament stuff? Can't we just say a prophetic word and go for it? But I actually think we need to be more intentional than that. And there are a couple of reasons for this. Number one, we see over and over again in the Bible itself that they had what they called schools of the prophets. And I believe these were places where they trained and equipped upcoming prophets, younger prophets, so that they would be more effective in their prophetic ministry. There are certain things you can do, things you can learn from older prophets, more seasoned and mature and wise prophets, that will assist you in whether it's prophetic accuracy or just greater impact in the words that you prophesy. And I believe we can learn in the same way, just as they did when they had schools of the prophets. Samuel had a school of the prophets. It's mentioned in the book of 1 Samuel that it was in Naioth at Ramah. So Ramah is a particular town, it's a district, and Naioth would have been probably a neighborhood around Ramah. You can go to Ramah today even. So there's some sort of a prophetic spirit that's probably still resting on the land in Ramah in Israel. So Samuel had a school. We know that there were the sons of the prophets, which was the language they were using at that point in time, during the time of Elijah and Elisha. And it even says that when the day that Elijah would be taken up to heaven, the sons of the prophets came out and they said to Elisha, your master's going to be taken up to heaven today. And he said, yes, I know, don't speak of it. And then after Elijah was taken up and they all watched him go, the sons of the prophets said, the spirit of Elijah rests upon Elisha. So the sons of the prophets were in existence even in those years. Now, just to put that into some context, Samuel was prophesying ahead of the coronation of Saul. So this would have been in the sort of 1100s BC. And then Elijah and Elisha, this would have been into the 800s BC. So for at least 300 years, we had schools of the prophets that helped raise and equip true prophets of God in old Israel. So I think it behooves us that we should study these things, that we would learn something of how they did what they did. But the other reason I think we want to study the minor prophets is this. The minor prophets are true prophets of God, but their books are generally shorter and more easy to get your head around. If we look at books like Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, these books are somewhat lengthy and they have a lot of things going on in them and they can be incredibly intimidating. And even though sometimes people will be intrepid enough to dive into these books and start trying to do something with them, oftentimes people get tangled up. They don't really understand the context. They don't understand some of the language. They don't understand the culture, the times. They just can't get their arms around it. But with the minor prophets, God has been good enough to give us some, we'd say, bite-sized morsels of filet mignon. These men, they've got us beat hands down because they actually made it into the Bible. Nobody who's watching this broadcast will ever make it into the pages of the Bible because the canon is closed. But these men, God gave them to us, and because they're shorter books, because they're easier to get our head around, we can actually learn from them. Now, there is a third reason why I think it's important to study these minor prophets as well. And that's this. When I look at history, I see that much of awakening, much of revival has been catalyzed by prophetic ministry. Most people don't see this. And in fact, right now I'm working on a doctoral program in which I'm going to write a dissertation on the catalytic role of the prophetic ministry of prophets in triggering awakening. No one has ever written a dissertation on this in history. That's a shocking thing. People have written dissertations on prayer and awakening. People have written dissertations on preaching and awakening. but no one has ever written on prophets or prophecy and awakening. And so, if you will, with the minor prophets and also the major prophets, but again, they're harder to access and to work with the minor prophets, think of it this way. Pretend that you wanted to be a Jedi Knight. You have 12 Yodas with which to train. And if we dive into these books, it gives us the opportunity to learn the real ways of prophecy as it was delivered by true prophets of God in an era now long gone. And we're going to try to bring all of the ministries of these men to life with the idea not only that we ourselves would become more effective in our prophesying, that we ourselves would have a better understanding of God, but that somehow we would raise the level of prophetic ministry to a place where it can once again become a tool that will trigger and catalyze awakening in America, in Europe, around the world.